Hello and welcome to yet another article critique, again with the Huffington Post here. Today we're looking at something that I thought, well, I know a bit about theology. I think this would be pretty interesting. A bit about politics, bit about theology. Let's see what's happening here. Okay, Jim Wallis, a contributor for the Huffington Post, also a Christian leader for social change, president and founder of that organization at Sojourners. I believe that may be for Twitter. I'm not entirely sure though, because I'm not with what all those cool kids are doing nowadays. So anyway, politically homeless, how both parties are leaving behind a generation of Christians, or leaving a generation of Christians behind. You know what? Sometimes it's interesting to play with the word order a little bit. What can Democrats do to attract evangelical voters who are so reliably drawn to Trump? Okay, so what I'm noticing immediately here is a contrast in the title and the subtitle of this article. The title seems to be very neutral. It's talking about both parties are leaving a generation of Christians behind. And then the subtitle really shows that the viewpoint of the article is what can Democrats do to attract evangelical voters who are so reliably drawn to Trump? Okay, but I haven't read this article beforehand, so I don't know whether or not I'm going to agree with it. So let's see what we've got here. We've got, by the looks of it, an elderly man wearing a turtleneck sweater. However, the collar on this one, it looks like it might be, or is it a turtleneck? It might not be. I can't actually see the front of it to see whether that's a turtleneck that's folded down or a different type of collar. So I can't really analyze that. Not that that's really something that by Getty Images. So probably not anything that actually relates to the article directly. I feel politically homeless as we enter 2018, and I know I am not alone. Many Christians are feeling the same, as other Christians, especially white evangelicals, emphasis on white here, have undertaken completely uncritical support for a president who is the antithesis of the gospel of Jesus Christ, endangering the reputation of Christianity, especially among a new generation. So what I see here is that I wouldn't call Donald Trump the antithesis of the gospel of Jesus Christ, but I certainly would agree that Donald Trump is not the most theological minded, not the most into the teachings, not the most well read biblically. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that that case can be made. But saying endangering the reputation of Christianity, I guess if you have someone calling himself a Christian who isn't too serious about Christianity, I can see how that would endanger the reputation. But to be honest, Donald Trump would not be the first person to do that, and certainly is not alone in doing that. So really, I don't see how you can really do anything about this, because this is something that happens all the time in Christianity. There's always people that are big voices that a large section of Christians wouldn't consider to be that representative of their theological viewpoints. But another thing to note, I think, is that Donald Trump himself does not purport to be a religious authority, as far as I know, nor does anyone ascribe that to him, as far as I know. So I don't really see the risk of endangering the reputation of Christianity when he's not actually a religious leader in Christianity. But uncritical support, that is something that really alarmed me during the election, that there were some people who had some fairly uncritical support, who would defend Donald Trump, even in situations where you say, you got to hand it to the critics. This is something where he's probably not 100% on, and people would defend him on anything, really. So I thought a lot of people had their high viewpoint of Donald Trump, their value of Donald Trump, their priority of this pure vision of Donald Trump a bit higher than it should have been, to be honest. Okay. Off on that. Of course, the two political parties are not morally equivalent. And by the way, the same with Clinton as well. Just to offer some contrast, people did that with Clinton, people did that with Obama, people did that with Romney. People tend to ascribe to their political leaders aspects that they really shouldn't. Of course, the two political parties are not morally equivalent. I think that's a pretty fair statement. It makes a great difference how we vote, as we will have the opportunity to do later this year. The Republican Party's political sellout to Donald Trump, bold words, but to be honest, I'm not going to actually disagree that much on that point. There are a lot of people who compromised quite a bit in agreeing to Donald Trump on what some might consider some certain values. And the lack of a clear moral alternative by the Democrats, many people of faith are excited to support. Leaves many of us feeling politically homeless. And you know what? I actually agree with the writer of this article on this point. They're really... I really didn't, in the main election between the two major parties, between the two major candidates that won the primaries, I didn't really think I could have someone who I thought was really morally worthy of the office of a presidency. I think all those people were eliminated in the primaries, from my perspective anyway. So I do understand what this person's getting at, even though this person is probably has a very different political philosophy than I do. Republican leadership has sold its party's soul to a bad, amoral, childish, and dangerous man. I think somewhat sure, but maybe in less strong words. I think he's not that dangerous. Okay, most of my Republican friends agree, and I can see why they would. I honestly can. Trump was elected president by anti-establishment backlash, and in a series of political accidents by both parties, many candidates, and our electoral system. He has been revealed as an intellectually shallow and mentally incompetent leader. I wouldn't say mentally incompetent, but intellectually shallow on certain things. His rhetoric certainly was shallow. His idea of getting Mexico to pay for the wall from the very beginning didn't really make sense to me. How was he possibly going to do that? It just wasn't going to happen. And by the way, it's not happening right now, and it's not going to happen. Unless the only way that could possibly happen is if the U.S. actually declared war on Mexico, which a fat chance that's going to happen. Okay. An unapologetic promoter of racial bigotry and misogyny. I disagree with that point. First of all, if you were to call him a bigot or misogynist to his face, he probably would disagree with you. And during the election, he frequently said things like that blacks love me and stuff like that, which say that if you're saying he's unapologetic, that's just wrong, because he is very apologetic about such things. And number two, I don't think he's bigoted or misogynistic, or at least in any overt fashion. I haven't really seen any real evidence for that specifically. A personality with embarrassing emotional immaturity and alarming instability that threatens disorder in the nation. You know what? Emotional immaturity? Sure. That sometimes locker room talk? Yeah, I guess. And alarming instability, and also how he treated other candidates in the debate just was... I didn't like watching those debates. I watched them, but I didn't like it because Trump was just in there. No respect. I couldn't take him that seriously. And alarming instability. I wouldn't say that he's unstable, though. Although he definitely did flip-flop on practically every single position that threatens disorder in the nation. And a leader whose disrespect for the rule of law and our political system of checks and balances can best be described as narcissistic and authoritarian paranoia. People can say the same thing about Obama and about Bush. Okay? People have said the same things about Obama and Bush. So you really need to qualify that if you want to make a special case for Trump. The President of the United States is now a very dangerous threat to American democracy and national security. While there are some Republican commentators and elected officials who have voiced opposition to the president's behavior, the Republican Party has shown itself unable or unwilling to hold him accountable, and has in fact become a captured party by an aspiring autocrat who is telling the world that he has the biggest nuclear button. Aspiring autocrat, show the evidence. I haven't seen any evidence that Trump wants to become, in any sense of the word, a monarch or a dictator. I haven't seen that. But the Republican Party, sure. Yeah, I guess that has happened to some extent. A lot of... They've got their president who's in their party, and they want to protect him in order to protect the party, so they play party politics. I personally, I don't like party politics. I just think that if the party disagrees with me, I'm not going to stick with the party. It's that simple. The GOP has disregarded the best values of principled conservatism, fiscal integrity and responsibility, an allegiance to truth and honesty, genuine pro-family values, national security for global engagement, the commitment to opportunity for all, the value of empathy for those in need and worth and equality of every person under the law. I wouldn't say that they've disregarded all of those things. You know, maybe on the fiscal side of things, yeah, they definitely compromised on that quite heavily. But the others, I wouldn't say as strongly on those. The Republicans have substituted a moral relationship to the presidency for a transactional one. You know, making deals. Trump's a deal maker. Yep. Ignoring Trump's consistent incompetence, immorality, and hateful divisiveness of the tweeting president. Is Trump divisive? Yeah, he can definitely be divisive sometimes. I wouldn't call him straight up hateful, though. I haven't seen Trump be hateful in any of his speeches. In exchange for economic and environmental regulations and tax cuts that support the greedy demands of their wealthiest donors. All this makes conservatives with Christian and moral values feel politically homeless. Now, on that penultimate sentence, tax cuts that support the greedy demands of the wealthiest donors, I do have to say that there's a big debate on what constitutes fair taxation and what is unfair taxation. There's a large movement that says that income taxes should be percentage based without any graduation, and that would be the fairest way to do it. And another group says that the richest people should pay a larger percentage than the poorer people, and they say that is a fair thing. So it really depends on perspective, because even with the Trump tax cuts, it still is heavily on the graduated side of things. Okay. The Democratic Party, on the other hand, has lost its historic relationship to working class people around the country. You mean syndicalism, right? No, I'm joking. And has indeed become dominated by cultural elites who have little connection to ordinary families and the many pressures on their lives. You know what? I think that's actually true. Democratic Party rhetoric doesn't appeal to the values of many Christians who care most about poverty and racism. I don't know about that one. I guess since I live in the South, it could be different in the North and in the Pacific Coast. Maybe Christians there focus a lot more on the poor and racism, but I don't think I've had any sermon in recent memory that I've heard that has dealt with that, to be honest. Because there's a very sizable population in the United States, a very sizable portion of a population that has the viewpoint that race is a non-issue. And that is contrasted to the two other groups that are either saying that race is an issue and we have to do all these things to protect certain people, and race is an issue and we have to do all these things to protect certain other people. I'm talking about the identity politics groups on both the left and the right, contrasted to the race neutral corpus that makes up another large portion of the population. For many election cycles, Democratic consultants have replaced the word poor with the words middle class, even though, technically speaking, if you're going to talk about middle class, that's actually a lot smaller population-wise than the poor. And the party is no longer perceived as the one that cares nearly enough about the needs of people on the margins of life in America. And you know what? Some people perceive the Democratic Party as a party that tries to garner votes however possible and promises handouts to people in order to get their votes. That's how some people view the Democratic Party, which I guess that has changed recently, according to this. Okay. For many election cycles, Democratic consultants have... gotta go farther. The text from Matthew 25 that draws many Christians into engaging in politics does not say, as you have done to the middle class, you have done to me. It rather has Jesus saying to us, as you have done to the least of these, you have done to me. Okay, a pretty strong message here. I guess the emphasis they're trying to say here is that respect for people should be universal regardless of social status. Respect isn't something that you have to earn, although you can certainly lose respect. It isn't something that you have to earn. And this is a philosophical point that I disagree with very many people on. I am perfectly fine, and I think morally obligated to respect absolute strangers. That's not saying that I give them my wallet. That's not what I'm saying, but I do believe that respect is something that I should have for everyone, really. It was once said that the moral test of government. Oh, okay. It is a biblical text that many democratic consultants seem not to have read or have forgotten. It was once said that the moral test of government is how the government treats those who are in the dawn of life, the children. Uh-oh. I can see a pretty big picture here. Some controversy. A lot of Christians oppose abortion, just saying. And we all know which political party is a lot more supportive of abortion than the other political party that is mentioned in this article. Just saying. Those who are in the twilight of life, the elderly, and those who are in the shadows of life, the sick, the needy, and the handicapped. These words from Hubert H. Humphrey would likely not be described as the mission of Democrats today, many of whom are as connected to the Wall Street elites as the Republicans are. And in many cases, some might say, even more connected. Despite being dependent on African American voters, the Democratic Party has often taken them for granted, which is true, instead of courageously addressing the realities of institutionalized racism. And by refusing to invest realities of institutionalized racism, what are they talking about here? Which institution, in the United States of America discriminates against African Americans? Where is this happening? Where do we have the signs on government offices that say, if you're black, you can expect to pay twice as much taxes, or some other weird race-related discrimination? Where are those Jim Crow laws? Just saying. And by refusing to invest in organizers, mobilizers, and candidates in African American and Latinx communities. I'm unfamiliar with that term, Latinx. Unfortunately, the Democrats are no longer a faith-friendly party. As we can see a while back at the DNC, there was a question on whether or not phrases related to God should be removed from the party platform. And they did it on a voice-based quorum, I guess, where they had people say yay or nay to that. And just by listening to it, it sounded like it was pretty close. Just saying. Voters with religious faith are often ignored or even dismissed from serious outreach of respectful dialogue. And another thing, yeah, there are a lot of... Actually, let's not get into that right now. I have fought religious fundamentalism for most of my life. You have fought religious fundamentalism. But the secular fundamentalism that controls much of the left and the Democratic Party at the national level can be equally ideological, irrational, and divisive, too often even seeming to attack religion itself. Oh, you mean like the new atheists, the atheism plus, I guess. Most issues of intrinsic concern to the faith community are often disregarded or disrespected by Democratic Party orthodoxy, which often takes extreme or overly strident views on issues like abortion. Okay. Many of us in the faith community regard abortion as a moral issue and part of a consistent ethic of life and seamless garment of concern for the many threats to human life and dignity. And you know what? I would agree with that. That's actually something I agree with. While many of us pro-life Christians don't support the criminalization or often desperate and tragic choices, we find the Democrats even reluctant to make a commitment to reducing abortion by supporting women with healthcare, nutrition, and social services. Okay. If it's a moral issue, abortion, what kind of a moral issue is it then? If you don't support the criminalization of it, because you're obviously not treating it like it's murder, so it definitely does not have that moral equivalent there. So, what I'm wondering, at what level morally does this person consider abortion to be bad? If he doesn't think that it's bad enough for criminalization, it obviously means that it's not morally equivalent to murder. So, I don't know. I think you may have a minority viewpoint there if you're pro-life on that. Okay. Many in Democratic leadership don't seem to want to talk about or even being willing to use the word reduction as a positive term in relation to abortion. Well, there's also a philosophy among some of these people that the world should have a lower population than it currently does. So I guess that could be another thing. Or if you want to talk about the old-timey abortion folks, a big motivation early on for a lot of these abortion activists was to help reduce the number of certain ethnic groups, particularly individuals of African descent. And even today, we see that it is disproportionately large in those communities, the number of people that get abortions. While you can't resolve an issue as complex as abortion in a couple of paragraphs, the denial of a moral conversation about it within the Democratic Party continues to alienate many people of faith. And I think that's true. If you're not even willing to consider discussing it as such, then there you go. But of course, a lot of these people have a very relativistic view of morality, where they don't really have a moral absolute to consider anything right or wrong. So, is that really a conversation that you have any common ground on that you can even have? Just saying. While a younger generation in the faith community is indeed more welcoming to LGBTQ people than their parents have been, they're not so welcoming of abortion as the Democratic elites seem to be, and the Democratic Party needs to figure that out. Okay. Gratefully, there are Democrats who want a more faith-friendly party and wider inclusion of ideas. You know, so just getting that demo in the Democrats, you know, put the people in there, eh? But I still hear many progressive Christian women and men feeling that the Democratic Party makes no outreach to them and offers them very little. Elements of the Democrats' richest donor base, unions? Or is there another donor base? Corporations? Continue to enforce extreme positions on abortion, not allow serious moral discussions, and I just got triggered. No Oxford comma. If you're going to have these long phrases and you put a comma there, and then another phrase here, you might as well put a comma there. And seem to want to close the party's tent to pro-life Democrats. Well, I guess there might be a lot of new neocons in the future, if you know what I'm saying. Similarly, the central importance of marriage, family, and parenting for the common good of society is not a central topic in Democratic Party language and policy, because they have this, they're increasingly, a lot of these people have this increasing view of the progressive identity politics orthodoxy, where you gotta be pro-abortion, you gotta be anti-religion, you have to be pro-LGBTQ, etc., and you have to view the white people as being people who are currently oppressing other minorities. And then they do all these purity tests and they destroy each other. And not a fun time, okay? That's not where you want to end up with a political party. And I'm not saying the entire party is that way. It's just that some people in it are. Many people favor turned away endorsement, whether intentional or by marked silence, of recreational sexuality over covenantal sexuality, and an anything goes attitude when it comes to sex. And that, again, is a very Christian issue to make. Of course, because from a Christian perspective, these are things that are set up for very specific reasons in society, and they have a lot of functional importance as well as symbolic importance as well. So, which I would discuss at another time, so I don't go too far off topic. Okay. Why is the discussion of family values among every type of family so absent from conversations on the left when we know it is part of critical solutions to overcoming issues of poverty? And you know what? That's true. It's a lot more difficult to raise children as a single parent. It really is. Those voices on the left advocating for strengthening families are seldom heard. And you know what? It would actually get you a lot more voters on the Democratic side of things if there were more voices for that, and actually a lot more action for that as well. With part of the Christian community putting faith at risk by their idolatrous support of Donald Trump, a very scathing comment. But to be honest, I once saw on TV some coverage of the election, and there was a guy dressed up like a Minuteman from way back in the Revolution. He's dressed up, he's got a blue coat with a tricorn, and the thing he says to the news reporter is, "Trump is love." And in my mind, of course, the obvious continuation is Trump is life, and then YouTube videos about parodies of the famous "Shrek is love, Shrek is life" memes. By the way, that's not safe for work. Don't look it up. So there are people who have a lot of admiration for Donald Trump. There's also a lot of people that sort of parody that with the God Emperor Trump thing from Warhammer 40k, where people do that. So there's a lot of memes being thrown around, but there are some legit people out there that really need to get their theological priorities straight. And other Christians feeling alienated by the other party's dismissal of faith and the moral questions it raises. And you know what? That's entirely true. Our nation's moral discourse is in serious trouble. Third parties have not been a successful way forward in the American system of politics. But if things like these continue, as you say, then they may actually be. but perhaps a third way, or better yet, a moral movement to revive and renew American politics on both sides of the aisle, is the way forward for people of faith who put the poor and vulnerable, the consistent dignity of human life, strong families and gender equality, and the priority of racial and economic justice and peace at the center of their political convictions. Very well said. Although priority of racial and economic justice, I don't know if my concept of what that would be in any way close to your concept of what that would be, but I really do understand where Jim Wallis is coming from, and I do have to say that I agree in principle with what this article is saying. Both parties are a bit out of touch with the sizable religious population in the United States, and there also needs to be a move for leaders that we can not only find acceptable on a policy level, but also on a moral level. A leader with good moral character and good sound policies. That is something that I think everyone would love to have. Now, of course, what constitutes these moral values and these good politics is going to depend on which political party you're in. But in principle, I agree with the article, even though on a fundamental level, I probably disagree with the author's philosophies in very many different ways. So there you go. You never know what's going to happen when you read an article. Sometimes you may entirely disagree. Sometimes you may find it entirely silly. But I think that the person that wrote this has some very serious and very real concerns here. So I thank you all for watching, and if you would like to critique articles alongside me, you don't have to have a top quality mic, you don't need a face cam, you don't need to be the 100% most eloquent person in the world. All you need is a mic and an internet connection, and we should be able to sort that out. I am looking for people to collab with me. Thank you very much, and I will be seeing you all next time on Awiltus Over and Out.